Hey, this is Derek. I just had some time on the road today. Just thinking about stuff, thinking about the world, and thought I'd just kind of share some thoughts while I had the time, had the space, had the freedom. Got no kids with me today, so I just wanted to talk about some things. We all know it is a crazy time right now. The world is just going insane right now. It's hard often to know how to comport ourselves, how to be in the world together. Especially for me, you hopefully know that I am a follower of Jesus, and that puts me in a weird spot in a lot of ways. Kind of straddling the kind of the Christian world and involved in other people that aren't believers, and that's a really complicated relationship. It can be, and especially for me, to be honest, I kind of find myself with a very different viewpoint from both of those communities that I'm in. Find myself seeing things quite differently from a lot of Christians that I know, and also obviously from a lot of non-believers that I know. So it's a tough world to navigate, and for all of us, it's tough to know how to handle the things that we're passionate about and that we are convicted about and we believe in, and how do we handle the relationships and interactions with other people that don't see the same way that we do. Some things can seem so clear to us, and the other person just doesn't see it. And again, we all know that in the United States, our culture is so divided, right? And really, I feel like when people firmly on one side or the other, the other side just doesn't make any sense to the opposite side. And the reality is that's just how people are. We do tend to stick with our groups and the way the people that see things the way we do, and we just can't always do that. But it is really difficult to see sometimes how other people get to the thoughts and beliefs and convictions that they have. But what's been really kind of being impressed upon me lately is just how much different things would be if we, and I know this, give me a minute, but I think, if we truly took seriously some of the teachings of Jesus, some of the ways that he calls and invites us into, things would be so much different. I honestly, as I look even across the Christian response to so many things, the church in the United States today, there's divide, there's division, there's enmity, there's frustration, there's anger, there's hurt, and all those things are understandable. But so many of us are fighting for what we believe in, and we lose a sense of who Jesus is and how he would have us live within it. The main teaching that keeps coming up for me, Jesus commands us not only to love our neighbors as ourselves. That kind of phrase has been really bandied about a lot. I was reading an article just the other day of people. That's been a big push for the vaccines and for a lot of things. Like, we need to love our neighbors, and that's true. That's right. But the sad thing is that so often in our social dialogue, we're seeing people call others to love their neighbors, but then when they don't, that call becomes a bludgeon. Does that make sense? That we're almost beating each other over the head with a call to love. And the major thing that we're missing out on is that Jesus goes beyond that. He says not only love your neighbor as yourself, but in what I think of as the pinnacle of his Sermon on the Mount, he says, go beyond that. He says, I tell you to love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you, bless those who curse you. And it has a and it says, then you will be children of God, children of the living God. And man, that's just really convicting, and I want to do that more in my own life. How do I love the people that I disagree with and that I just cannot understand how and why they believe and act the way that they do? How do I still love them even if I vehemently think that they're wrong? And I was talking to somebody the other day about the amazing thing about that command to love your enemy is that so often we might really get in conflict over something with someone and really do a lot of damage to a relationship because we think that we're right. But how often do we find out that we're wrong, but the damage is done, right? So part of what I think of as you could say the moral genius of that call to love our enemies is that, man, sometimes we're going to believe staunchly in a position or in an idea, and then maybe we're going to find out that we're wrong, and we do that all the time. But the beautiful thing is that if I love my enemy even when I cannot see how I'm possibly wrong and I cannot see how they're possibly right, if I am loving my enemy, if I find out I'm wrong, man, I haven't done any damage to that relationship. And that's just a beautiful thing. And I want to see us taking up that call more, that charge more, especially as believers. If you think of yourself as a Christian, if you are following Jesus, man, we've got to do that. We have to be loving our enemies, and that call is even more intense when we're in such a polarized society, right? Because there are believers on two sides of these arguments, two sides of these things, and I'm not saying that there aren't things that we need to fight for, aren't things we need to think about and kind of hold positions on. But even in so doing, we have to love our enemies. And that's the thing, you don't see anybody else doing this. You don't see anybody else calling for this but Jesus. But how's that working out for the world, right? Is it working out for the world to just continue to try to defeat their enemies? Clearly it's not. Clearly things aren't going well when we think the only option is to overpower and overtake and overwhelm those we disagree with. That's really kind of, in some sense, how we've gotten here, because things just don't go away by overwhelming them and overpowering them. But really, the way I see it, and you might disagree, but the way I see it, the only solution to so many of our problems and so many of our issues, the only way we'll actually begin to hear some things and understand one another, even begin to understand one another, is if we start to learn to love our enemies. And part of the problem is we often don't think like, well, I don't have any enemies, but I would ask you, who online do you speak out against? Who are you posting articles against? Who are you railing against, one way or the other, right? That person is your enemy. Who do you disagree with so much so that you think that you want to speak out publicly against their position, their idea? That's your enemy, right? It doesn't have to be somebody that you have on a kill list on your wall, or that that you're actively fighting against specifically. But man, you probably have a list of people that kind of irk you. You probably have a type of person, or a person of a certain ideology, or a certain way of thinking or acting, or a certain political party that bother you. that person, those people are your enemy. Let that sink in for a minute. Begin to think of it that way, because you can't love your enemy really unless you identify them. Unless you also take, if you also just consider everyone your neighbor, love them too. That's the beauty of what Jesus tells us to do, is love our neighbors as ourselves and love our enemies. So no one falls through the gaps there. No one falls through the cracks there. There's no one that you cannot love. We don't get off by saying, well, they're not my neighbor, so I can be really mean with them, or really uncaring or unkind, or I don't have to listen to that talk. They're not my neighbor. But if they're your enemy, and if you follow Jesus, this is our call. And so, in some ways, I want to call Christians, if you believe in Jesus right now, we have to see, especially in this day and in this time, in this hour, we have to follow Jesus. We have to not just believe a certain set of ideas about who God is and what He's done. That's important. But He does not call us just to think certain things and then fight for those things. He calls us to follow Him, live out who He is, who He was in our own lives. The term Christian just means little Christ, right? We are to be, in some sense, little Christs running around and doing His work in His ways. And so man, I really challenge you, if you think of yourself as a believer or follower of Jesus. I kind of have stopped using the term Christian, right? Because in our culture, that could be such a large blanket that we can all fit under. But it doesn't always mean that I'm following Jesus. Hopefully it does. But I just want to encourage you to think more in that way. If you really want to live the life that He has called you to, if you really want to see the fruit and the joy and the restoration of things as He has called you into, it requires that we follow Him. It requires that we live in the ways that He has taught us and called us and actually commanded us to live. We get to do these things. We get to love other people sacrificially. We get to see the fruit and the joy in that. Jesus' love was one that was sacrificial. It is not a toothless love. But we have to be intentional about that. We have to participate in what God is doing. And it does take some effort. It does take some intention. It does take at least the intention of saying, God, help me do this. I know that You want me to. I know that You want me to love my neighbors, my friends, my coworkers, even if they're my enemies. I know You want me to love them in radical ways. But I need help. That's okay. But it does require that we participate, that we intend and desire to live like He wants us to. So I encourage you, if you are a follower of Jesus, if you're a Christian today, please, now more than ever, it's a time to walk out and live out the character of Jesus in the world around us. Our world needs to see and be touched and affected by and changed by the character of who Jesus is. It needs it. We need it. We need people that are loving radically. We need people that have just astounding compassion. We need people that are willing to sacrifice, to love and serve and bless our enemies. And those are baffling things to a world that doesn't understand. And no one's going to do it but us. So I don't want to get too crazy. I could keep talking, and I've got a long drive today. I could keep talking, but I just wanted to encourage you in that today. Follow Jesus. Don't just believe. I think that's going to be a big topic and a big theme that I'm just going to go on about a lot here in the next few weeks and months and years. Just the world needs people that are following Jesus, and those of us that believe in Him, we've got to do that. And if you don't believe in Jesus right now, I encourage you to learn from Him. There's nothing that the world is going to change or fix on its own. None of these social issues are going to go away if we engineer them enough, or if we meddle enough, or if we advance enough technologically. And honestly, the Bible says that they're not going to go away, but there can be healing and redemption and joy for you in the midst of it. And there can be a courage and a lack of fear. That was another big thing I've been thinking about on the drive, just how, another way that we need to obey Jesus is to not be afraid, not have fear in this day. There's so much to be afraid of, but if we're in Jesus, man, we don't have any reason to fear. So maybe I'll talk about that another time. But yeah, that's all I've got for you today. I love you guys, and I hope that you are learning and growing either towards or in following Jesus. That's what I want for you, because there's such full and rich life in that. So yeah, bless you, and I will talk to you another time.